All right, so switching now into the rest of U.S. politics, it's a presidential election year. So what's going on with that? Well, the Democratic Party is running an incumbent who obviously has the sort of home team advantage that all incumbents have. Incumbents almost always get reelected. But they're running a guy, Joe Biden, with a 37% approval rating. I'm not sure what exactly is going into that, but they don't appear to even be trying to win this election. And instead, they're touting Joe Biden as, quote, the most progressive president of our lifetimes. What are you even talking about? He's presiding. I mean, it just isn't. I mean, no president is particularly progressive, but especially not Joe Biden. Um, what do we have here? President Biden job approval. This is from Real Clear Polling. So, I mean, that last one was from Reuters. But yeah, here you've got basically the same thing. You've got like a 38, 39, 40% approval rating. That's pretty bad. And then if you look, compared to previous administrations, the job approval by March 14th of the fourth year, you've got Biden at 39.8 on this average, which includes a bunch of different polls. You know, Rasmussen, USA Today, Forbes, Emerson, Financial Times, Tip, New York Times, Fox News, The Economist, YouGov, and so on. So Biden's got 39.8. Trump, who lost re-election, had a 44.6. Obama had a 47.1, did win re-election. Bush, George W. Bush, had a 49.6. Okay, bucking George Bush had a 49.6 in his fourth year, March 14th. And, you know, Obama and Bush won re-election. They had a 47.1 and a, 50, basically, if you round it. Trump lost re-election with a 44.6 at this point, a little bit lower, and also was Trump. I mean, there was like so much outrage at things that Trump was doing. There was also outrage at things that Bush was doing. But, the system, the confidence in the system was so much more intact at that point versus by the time it got up to Trump. There really needs to be a more in-depth analysis of the ways that the Bush government kind of broke the system as it had existed up to that point. At some point, someday we will get into that. For the time being, actually, I have a documentary from the BBC uploaded to the channel. It's called War Party from 2003. If you're not super familiar with what happened during the Bush-Cheney years, start with War Party because it'll give you a bit of a glimpse into the fucking madness that was happening at that time that really it set the tone for everything that has followed since, and nobody will fucking talk about it. But yeah, Trump didn't get elected because he was in like the beginnings of the pandemic, and people are like, well, Biden's going to do a better job with that. So what are Biden's odds really of being this unpopular and already, facing off against Trump in the polls? I think the last poll, we put this up on the community tab, it was like Biden 42, Trump 47 or something like that, was like if the election was held today, who would you vote for? And so this is filtering back to the Democrats. My point about saying they don't seem to be trying to win is the next time that you encounter somebody either in real life or online that's like, but Trump and you got to vote for Biden because it's all, I mean, look, I think it's scary too. We're not in great times right now, but thinking that Democrats are somehow going to fix this is just like nonsense. Just tell them, look, if the Democrats were actually trying to win, they'd run somebody else. They're not, so like, fuck them. You're not going to put this on us. That's why I offer that. But even the Democratic Party is getting it from their own voters. This is from Newsweek. Joe Biden voters tell him to drop out. And, people, supporters of Biden, will frequently complain about how the New York Times runs a million articles about how old Joe Biden is. That isn't really the issue. I mean, for the New York Times it is, because they want somebody who will do all the things that Joe Biden is doing, but just is less old. I mean, obviously for us, the problem is more what he's doing than his age. But anyway, according to this article, a majority of those who voted for Joe Biden in 2020 would support him dropping out of the 2024 White House race, according to a new poll conducted exclusively for Newsweek surveyed 1,500 eligible U.S. voters and found 54% of those who had voted for Biden in 2020 want him to leave the current race. Only 21% would actively oppose Biden switching out, which sounds about right to me. Like only 1 in 5 really want Biden specifically to stay in. Those who voted Democrat in 2020 are more likely to support Biden dropping out than the general public. Like it's people who really take it more seriously, I think, and are more concerned, among whom 45% want the sitting president to step aside, while 30% are opposed. This was conducted on March 2nd. And there's some more breakdown of what was asked in that poll in that article. But I mean, I think, again, what this speaks to is widespread unpopularity of Biden. And here's an example of that that doesn't, have anything to do with his age. This is from Speaking Security, written by Stephen Semler. Biden ignores the child care crisis while lobbying for Israel. This is from March 4. So the article I just wrote for The Intercept and the Economic Hardship Reporting Project compares the level of effort that Joe Biden put toward advancing 2 funding proposals, the first for foreign aid and the second for domestic needs, both of which he introduced in late October. He fought harder for the first than he has for any other proposal. He completely ignored the second. If there's one case study to illustrate where Biden and the Democratic Party are politically right now, this might be it. Biden didn't fight for $16 billion to mitigate the child care crisis, but did push for $16.5 billion for Israel's war in Gaza, which has killed over 12,500 children. So, I mean, the article goes on. There's just one example. And Israel. So it is an election year, and Israel having some role in that. Somebody mentioned this in a previous stream and sent in an article which I hadn't seen before, but I think is worth sharing in this context. People were really up in arms about, I think, the manufactured hysteria around Trump and Russia, which did seem to kind of be a nothing burger once it was picked into as far as their, quote, election interference. You want to talk about that? This is a super long article, by the way, in The Nation. The Trump campaign's collusion with Israel. While U.S. media fixated on Russian interference in the 2016 election as a convenient excuse for Hillary Clinton to, explain away her awful campaign and completely embarrassing loss, an Israeli secret agent's campaign to influence the outcome went underreported. It says unreported. And so this is from last April 2023, so published about 11 months ago. It was written by James Bamford, who is a guy who has written, I think he's ex-NSA or ex-CIA. So like he's the guy who did the Operation Northwoods thing in the context of people looking at the 9/11 attacks. He wrote material about the declassified Operation Northwoods operation, which would have been a false flag setup of Cuba by the U.S. in the 60s, which was nixed by JFK. It was basically a plan to run drone planes, which would then be have fake distress calls, and then they would be blown up over Cuba, and then blamed to start a war with Cuba. And this would be tied in. This was dreamed up by General Lyman Lemnitzer in the U.S. military, and it would be blamed on Cuba and tied in with false flag terrorist attacks in Florida. And so it would basically be used to hype up public support for a U.S. invasion of Cuba after the revolution in Cuba. So, this is the kind of stuff that the U.S. does. Bamford has written about that in the past. But this is an incredibly long article that goes into a huge amount of detail, and I did want to point it out because it was mentioned by a commenter in a previous stream. Israel has enormous influence in U.S. elections. It's another thing when, the next time the Democrats are doing a round of voter shaming and, most important election of our lifetimes, why are you letting all of these interest groups have so much sway in the election? So here's an article from Politico. AIPAC, which is the main Israel interest lobby in the U.S., uncorks a $100 million war chest to sink progressive candidates. Building on a successful playbook from 2022, AIPAC and other aligned groups are picking their targets, many more of them this time. And so in the picture is California State Senator Dave Min, who's faced a barrage of attack ads funded by AIPAC, focused largely on his DUI arrest last year. So I would expect a lot of that this year, as what you hear among pro-Israeli interest groups and media is behind the scenes they are very concerned about the dropping public support. They really overplayed their hand in the genocide and ethnic cleansing that they're doing in Palestine, and it's finally catching up with them in a major mainstream way. This has long been the case that anyone on the left, and even left liberal, has opposed or wanted to see changes with what was going on with Israel. Now it's really hitting the mainstream like never before, and Israel's freaked out. Expect them to be making more forays into trying to manipulate the politics. Another long article, but check it out if you're interested. So this is another one. We talked about the Uncommitted Campaign in the last stream, 112. Here's an article from The Guardian. Michigan Democrats have sent Biden a flashing warning sign about the election. Voters want Biden to drastically change course on Gaza and deliver a ceasefire. Only stopping Israel's war will assuage voters. So the issues are being laid out for you. If you don't listen, it's because you weren't trying to win. There's another article here. If Biden loses in November, don't blame voters who are angry over Gaza, by Arwa Madawi. We all know how devastating a second Trump term would be. It's also important to understand the damage that Biden is doing by funding what can plausibly be described as a genocide. Forced relocation of, entire populations, that is ethnic cleansing.